those in the restaurant industry, and you have folks that put in nominations for best chef and best restaurant and tour and best bartender, best manager, and so forth. And then there are all sorts of scholarships awarded to young people in the culinary arts that are looking to make a career in the restaurant industry. And it was on Sunday night, and sometimes those things go late. You want to socialize afterwards. And I just always have so much vacation time that I end up not using at the end of the year. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to take Monday off and allow you all to have Darren Chapel for the day. That way I don't have to worry about it because, you get home and then you're kind of amped up a little bit because you've been socializing with people and it's hard to wind down. And so anyway, that's why I was gone. I just love doing that. It's all of the people are incredible and fantastic. And given that a significant portion of our household income is due to that industry, I've got a personal connection to it.
Do you get paid in delicious food?
They do. It's a dinner. It's a banquet dinner, and so yeah.
I'd do it just for that.
The last several years, I think it was last year they didn't have it, but the last few years it's been at the Oasis Center, and so it was fantastic, and they have drinks and wine on the table and everything. It's just a nice time. Sat at an awesome table of people, and we just had a really, really good time. And so I want to thank those folks for allowing me to do that and then I've got Vitae on Friday.
Yep.
There's 3 annual events that I MC, and they're so diverse. You've got the Missouri Restaurant Association's annual event, then the humanitarian event coming up Friday, the Vitae Foundation, and then the Christian County Lincoln Days, which is political. Those are the 3 that annually, as long as they ask me to MC, I'm always honored to be able to do so. So a little bit of a variety. Not as much as somebody like Jeremy Rabe. I'm sure that he has every event I go to that I'm not emceeing, he's usually the MC of. And he's much better than I am. He's much more animated and personable than I am. But, I do what I can. And they keep having me back, so I must not
be doing... be good at it.
Must be all right at it. Passable, anyhow. But I do want to thank them for allowing me to do that again. I want to start off this morning talking about some updates when it comes to flock cameras. Trump actually was asked about this recently, and we'll play the audio of him essentially saying, well, it's something that we're looking at. There are a lot of people that are concerned about it, and this is one of those issues that really organically, I think it's fair to say, has been over time bubbling up. And I say organically because it's just all these different towns around, not just locally, but across the country. And increasingly we learn about how, well, oftentimes people in law enforcement misusing the tool. I don't believe that's a reason not to use a tool necessarily, because people in law enforcement, I mean, you get a bad apple in there and they can misuse anything, any tool that they have, be it a baton or a stun gun or a firearm. But we don't say, well, we should not allow them to have that tool. Now, I have a great deal of opposition to flock cameras, just not for that reason. But some of the stuff, one of the areas that does concern me so much, and there was a video that has been circulating of a woman who had a visit from law enforcement at her home, telling her that they had 100% proof she stole a package off someone's front porch. And her husband was at the door, and she was just like, you could tell trying to grab, like, where was this supposed to have happened? And he's telling her, well, you drive through and he flat out tells her, you cannot go in and out of this town without us tracking you 100% of the time. And she was asked, because he claimed that, well, we have absolute proof. So he's like, you're dead to rights, because you can argue with me all you want, but we have absolute 100% proof that you did this. And part of that proof, or what he was alleging was the proof, or the flock camera. So she asked, can I see this proof? And he told her, well, if you confess, I'll show it to you. Otherwise, I'm not going to because you're not cooperating. Well, it would turn out that she, fortunately, was able, through her cell phone records and I think a security camera at a store or something, was able to prove that the flock cameras were wrong. And this is something that does occur at times. The cameras only grab partial license plates, and then there'll be an identification made based off of that that's erroneous. And it actually happens to a much larger degree than I had thought. But my concern is that sometimes, and that was one example of it, the information that is gathered from a flock camera is almost treated like DNA, as if, nope, you're dead to rights. And it just becomes this default. This particular example, Reason Magazine actually has a couple of these cautionary tales, and the one regarding the woman, the Reason Magazine's focus wasn't so much that the flock cameras in and of themselves are, that perhaps there is a privacy issue there, but when it comes to people being falsely accused of things, and that woman spent a couple weeks in jail because of the belief that if the flock camera says it saw you, and what would have otherwise been just a little bit of footwork on behalf of law enforcement, they could have easily determined that she wasn't the one that was stealing the package off of this woman's front porch, but they didn't bother to do that because, well, the flock camera said it was her, and that's proof. And so in that particular case, they just threw her in jail and let her sit there until she was able to proactively prove that she was innocent. And so the ease at which the belief that, well, if a flock camera saw you, it saw you. You can't deny that, allows for a person who may be in law enforcement to just default to that, as opposed to doing the footwork and investigating the situation. Ends up being well, you're guilty, you go straight to jail while you wait for your trial, unless, in that particular case, she proved herself innocent. And that's not an isolated case. And that's one of the concerns that I have, is that the supposed infallibility of the flock cameras will be utilized by human beings that are fallible, and they will just default to that as proof when oftentimes it isn't proof. There have been a number of citizens with concerns that I understand, and I wanted to share with you regarding Willard and law enforcement, encouraging citizens to contact aldermen in the city and tell them that you are for the flock cameras. And a lot of the citizens are very uncomfortable with this. They're visiting people in uniform. They're sending text messages, or law enforcement is. And apparently, local media is very hesitant to even write a story about this. So I want to get you in the loop on all of that as well. The Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447-KSGF. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96, heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, we'll see a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97, heat index values as high as 104. And for Thursday, a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
All right, let's talk about the flock camera thing, shall we? Because it's always a fun one. Bolivar has really sent a signal to the area, and I don't know if there's been any nationwide traction on it, but I think it easily could become inspirational, if you will, for people who want, they live in a community in which flock cameras are in place and they want them gone. And here Bolivar was like, okay. And even if we, they had a $54,000 grant, I believe, associated with the usage of flock cameras, and like, even if we have to pay this thing back, and they've gone around and they've put bags over them. I mean, they're extremely proactive in reflecting the will of the citizens, and frankly, that's just not something that a lot of people, particularly in this area, are accustomed to seeing. A council or a group of alder persons that is so directly responsive to the will of the citizens, particularly if there's money involved, as oftentimes is when it comes to these situations, dangling money in front of departments. And I think when you are dealing with smaller departments, that can be even more attractive. When you are very limited on resources and somebody comes along and they dangle tens of thousands of dollars in front of you, suddenly if you are a person that does lean a little more towards protecting the privacy of the citizens, you can start to, figure out ways, well, maybe this isn't such a bad idea after all. It's human nature. We've had folks on from Springfield, citizens that have brought their concerns to the city of Springfield. The police chief in Springfield, according to one of those citizens that came on the show a couple of weeks ago, was very dismissive and said, oh, it's just, it's a small group of loud people, not too worried about it. Willard is another community, and we've had a citizen from the Willard community who has great concerns about the flock cameras come on this program as well. And I had heard last week that there were uncomfortable rumblings about law enforcement in uniform going to citizens and encouraging them to communicate with members of the council that they are supportive of the flock cameras being in place. One of and apparently the chief of police of Willard has been texting out to some of the members of the Willard community the following, and I just have some snapshots that have been sent to me from residents of Willard, and it reads as follows. Hello, this is Tom McLean, Chief of Police for Willard, Missouri. Our Board of Alders will be voting on whether or not to continue leasing the use of the flock surveillance systems on August 23rd, 2026. At this time, I am recommending that we continue the contract with fewer cameras. Would you mind responding to this text? Why, if you support my recommendation, or if you would prefer we drop the flock system and fund some other public safety item. Thank you so much for your response. Now, one of the individuals that I'm aware of, there may have been others as well, responded with, "How did you get this number?" And you can understand, this isn't an elected official. It's not like a sheriff. You're talking about a chief of police. And, when you're an elected official, oftentimes you have access to voter information that isn't necessarily, I guess it would be open to the public. But when you are talking about an employee of the city, for a lot of people, like, how did you, what is this? How did you get my number? And so the natural question was just that. How did you get the number? And the chief of police responded from City Hall. I'm doing a text poll of all the citizens who voted for the LE sales tax in April 2025. Thank you for voting. Now, as you can imagine, this is concerning for the way it's worded. One can infer that something that isn't necessarily possible, and that is how people voted when it came to the sales tax in April 2025. I don't think that is what he meant. I think that he was talking when he referenced, I'm sending a text poll to all the citizens who voted for the sales tax in April of 2025, the LE, law enforcement. I suspect what he meant is that they voted in that election. They didn't necessarily vote yes, but they were voting on that particular issue. I think it's just wording that has left some people thinking that somehow law enforcement knows whether they voted for it or not, but I don't think that's what was intended here. There's also a hard letter that has been sent out to business owners, and it reads as follows. Dear business owner and or manager, and this is on official Willard Police Department letterhead. On August 24th, 2026, at about 6 p.m., the Willard Board of Alders will be voting on whether to renew the flock camera surveillance system inside our city limits. Would you mind to take a few minutes and contact your mayor or alders, letting them know your opinion on the matter? Please don't hesitate to call me if you have questions. It is my opinion that the positives of the flock system outweigh the possible negatives. Please be careful to contact them individually rather than corporately in order to avoid any technical references to a formal meeting or a quorum. Now, what that's in reference to is, I'm sure every community is different. In order for legally, let's say, city council, for example, you have to have so many members in attendance and communicating for it to be an official meeting. And it's recognized that even communicating by mass email, it doesn't mean you have to be in City Hall, but that would be considered a quorum if you have a certain number of the council members, enough in order to, let's say, get something passed. And this is something that is put in place in order to prevent people that are part of a governing body conspiring behind the scenes to vote a certain way and to do it in secret instead of out in the open. And so even when it comes to text messages, you are not allowed to have on a text or an email enough of the other voting persons of any voting body to where it could be considered a quorum. And so that's what he's referencing here. He's trying to make sure that citizens don't get any of the council members in trouble by being part of a communication that involves enough of the members for it to be considered a quorum. He goes on to say, in my opinion, this is the best use of the $28,985.50 we will be awarded this year for our Blue Shield grant funding. And then it has a listing of all of the alderpersons, the mayor, and their contact information by way of email address. Now, I think that this is an interesting one. And the concern that some citizens have is the feeling of somebody in the law enforcement capacity who's not, again, a sheriff. That's a separate situation because that is an elected official. This is somebody that is hired by the city. This is an employee of the city. And so to have someone in law enforcement contacting individuals and their a lot of the rumblings are about face-to-face visits showing up in uniform, essentially letting the citizens know, hey, this is where we stand when it comes to law enforcement, or when it comes to the flock cameras. We'd really like you to let your elected official know where you stand on it as well. And the problem that some have is that there's a bit of perhaps undue influence, that some people might feel pressured to support it because law enforcement is directly contacting them and telling them essentially, hey, this is what we want. Now we want you to go tell the alder person that represents you what it is that you want. I want to give you, my thoughts on it and the level of appropriateness or inappropriateness coming up here in just a couple of moments. The Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. Ozarks Elder Law, very important to plan, a plan for your future and when you no longer have a future, aka you die. You oftentimes, and I know this is common, you hear about people will ahead of time pay for the arrangements being for them, the dead one, where I'm going to be buried. Make sure that it's paid for. And that's done because people don't want to, while their family is grieving and mourning, them to have to worry about making those decisions. But what they don't think about is what happens to your property, what happens to your vehicle, even things as simple as how there's a lot of people pay for things through auto pay. How to what are your username and passwords to shut off your cable and your internet when you're no longer there? How to pay, just maybe some debt that is owed so that it doesn't fall on them. Is it going to fall on them? That's something they're having to worry about. And so these are all the things that the average person doesn't think about until they're going through it, unfortunately. And it's the sort of thing that Ozarks Elder Law helps you navigate around and prevent so many of these problems, because it's just a matter of having somebody who's an attorney draw up the proper paperwork for you, and that's what they do. And the consultation to find out what you need to do based off of your specific situation is something that they do as a courtesy, and then they'll let you know a one-time cost. Here's what it'll cost to have us draw all that paperwork up, and then you decide whether you want to do it or not. So really kind of a no-brainer. OzarksElderLaw.com, free consultation, 10 area locations, and you can go find all of their info as well under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96 and heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97 and heat index values as high as 104. And taking a look at Thursday, we'll see a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
There has been a lot of community concern in Willard about flock cameras and the fact that citizens are sort of passing around these text messages they say they're getting from the chief of police, who is identifying himself and saying, hey, there is an upcoming vote that the alderpersons, much like Bolivar, are going to have regarding whether or not to continue the use of these flock cameras. He's like, hey, I think that the good outweighs the bad. Doing this sort of survey, text Y if you are for it, text in if you are against it. And someone, according to the snapshots of the text messages, were like, how'd you get this number? And he replied, from City Hall, I'm doing a text poll of all the citizens who voted for the law enforcement sales tax in April of 2025. Thank you for voting, Tom McLean. Now, one of the concerns, and apparently a citizen has done a sunshine request in order to try and figure out like how this information was obtained, and the concern being that how is it that law enforcement knows how I voted? And I don't believe that is what he meant. Having not had a conversation with him on this, I can all but guarantee you he did not mean when he stated who voted for the law enforcement sales tax. I think it's fair to believe that he was saying who voted on that tax, not necessarily for it, but on it. And that information is public information. That is public to you. Not how you voted, obviously, because you're when you go and you do a ballot, your name's not on the ballot. It gets plopped into the machine, and there's no identifier on it that identifies you. But the fact that you voted is something that is public information. Some states make that very, very easy information to obtain. For example, the few years that I lived in Wisconsin at the time, you could go to the Secretary of State's website and enter your name and some other required information, and it would show every single election that you voted in. This is information that is used by campaigns when it comes to how best focus resources, particularly mailers and knocking on doors in neighborhoods, to focus on individuals first. All right, who voted in primaries? Let's hit those people first, because you don't want to waste resources on people that never vote or who vote only in general elections but not necessarily primary elections. So it allows elected officials to prioritize, and so that information is absolutely 100% public, not only to the chief of police but to anyone who wants that information. Missouri, I'm not sure exactly how it is that you go about getting it. It's not as easy as it was the time that I was in Wisconsin in terms of just going on a website, as far as I know. But nonetheless, that is obtainable, and it is perfectly legal and public information at that. I don't believe well, let me back up. First off, I don't think that doing a poll that way is a very scientific way to go about doing this. That doesn't mean that it can't give you some sense. It would be interesting if he gets 80% back saying no and only 20% saying yes, if that is information that he will reveal. I don't know. I have no idea. It's a real mixed bag, people's perspective on these flock cameras. It seems as if people in smaller towns are a bit more opposed, and I suspect part of the reason that is because as people who live in big cities, sort of for years have assumed that they're under surveillance by government, and there are cameras everywhere, and there's just this surrender, if you will, of sorts that that's just the way it is, and they've become so accustomed to it. Whereas people in small town, it's one of the things that people like about a smaller town is we don't have to worry about all of those things. And so you have a lot of the concerns popping up in some of these smaller areas. Smaller towns traditionally are a little less liberal as well, and I think that also has somewhat of a play in people's assessment in it. Now, regarding law enforcement, non-elected law enforcement, utilizing their position in law enforcement to directly communicate with citizens and ask them, even if it's by way of text, identifiable individuals, because if this stuff is being texted out, and as the text messages indicate, it is because the chief of police got the names of people and the contact info of people who voted on the law enforcement tax, then people know this chief of police knows who I am. And he's telling me what his preference is and asking me some people that might make uncomfortable. Now, I want to hit this from a position of benefit of the doubt, because I don't know that there's any reason not to give benefit of the doubt, that the chief of police is not attempting to intimidate people, that the chief of police is not trying to put undue influence on people, have people intimidated into thinking, well, gosh, the police, and I don't want to be on the bad side of law enforcement. Even when, and for some people even more so, there is a good relationship with law enforcement, it can make people even more uncomfortable, because as one of the citizens who had communicated with me on this noted, that this is really putting a lot of citizens in a tough place, because this is an individual in law enforcement, the chief of police in Willard, that is a beloved member of the community and is going to be retiring soon and has severe health issues. He had I believe it was the double lung transplant. It was in the news. And so it's almost upside down, because if this were a real jerk of a police chief, then a lot of people might have no problem whatsoever, not be intimidated, be like, hell no. And the fact that you're for this makes me even more against it. But given that this is someone that many people in the community really feel is a beloved member of the community, and then he's directly sending text messages to you, he knows who you are, it's making some people feel as if, well, I don't want to tell him no because I really like the guy. The problem with that sort of situation is, one, you can't rely on getting accurate responses from people. We used to do what were called listener labs. It's been years since we've done them, listener advisory boards. And listeners for all of our stations would be contacted and asked if they would participate in what you would think of as a focus group. If they would come to the station on a particular evening with other listeners, and they'd be provided pizza, and then just answer questions about their radio station. And we would know that these were what are called P1s, so loyal listeners. Like a P1 is someone who, if it's your P1, that means you are the station they go to first. They listen to the most. You're their favorite station. And so it was sort of to gauge certain things. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? The one thing that we always did was have someone from one of the other stations conduct the listener advisory board. So, for example, when there would be a listener advisory board for KTTS, I might conduct it. But if there was a listener advisory board for KSGF, we had someone from another station conduct it, because we didn't want people catering their answers based off what they thought we wanted to hear. We didn't want me asking people, what do you think about my show? Because people would probably be less likely to give their honest opinion if they're talking to a person that, well, one is me, but directly connected to the station. And so a problem with the chief of police sending out text messages to people who know, okay, he knows who I am, asking, hey, do you support this thing that I support, is you're just not going to get accurate responses. It is going to, if people give a response that is inconsistent with their true feelings, in all likelihood, it's going to be in favor of what they think the person asking the question wants it to be. And so you can't count on it being accurate. But I think secondly, and listen, this isn't, I don't even think it's I don't know, some people might think of it as an ethical thing. I think that putting people in a position in which they may feel uncomfortable or pressured just because of the nature of the relationship just isn't overall a positive thing for the relationship between the people and that entity or institution. And like I said, it doesn't mean that law enforcement is trying to intimidate. It can be pure as the driven snow, just genuinely believing, hey, we kind of want to know how people feel about it. This is how we feel in law enforcement. We think it's important for you to understand that, but we also want to know how you feel. It can just make people feel like, boy, this relationship suddenly... I feel like I know what answer they want me to give, and now I'm very uncomfortable. And I'm sure that is not the intent. But for a lot of people, that is what occurs. Now, so what is the answer? Because it is important, I think, for the citizens to hear from law enforcement. That's an important thing. And that's an argument in favor of this, right? Hey, I mean, you need to have both sides of the story here. Yeah, there are the privacy concerns, but what good do they do to law enforcement? Why is it law enforcement finds those things to be valuable? I believe the best way to go about doing that is to not contact people one-on-one, not send people individual letters saying, here's how I feel. Hey, now why don't you let your council person or alder person know how I feel? I would use the public forum of council meetings to show up and to say, here's why it is that we support, or even just send out these mailers not asking people to take any sort of action, but just hear your perspective, saying, hey, look, we understand that there are some concerns, but we just want to make sure you understand why it is that we feel that these are valuable tools that ultimately have a positive impact on the safety of the community. To me, that seems like the best way to go about it, while at the same time keeping a good, healthy relationship with the citizens if you are law enforcement. And I think that's a very, very, very important thing to do. And sometimes certain actions can be taken when you become so accustomed to being an authority figure. It is easy to forget how people perceive the relationship. And even though a person in law enforcement may feel small town, I'm no... I'm just one of the community who happens to be in law enforcement. Citizens, that's your perspective, but you got to understand when it comes down to it, they do recognize you are law enforcement. And that perception really does make a difference. One of the other, and I think it plays into this particular perspective, it was relayed to me that local media outlets have been contacted about this, and one reporter in particular would not report on it, and was claiming that they thought maybe all of this was fake, because if this was actually being done, this would be way over the line and inappropriate. And again, I don't know. That's just one individual's perspective. But when it comes to law enforcement issues, even when it comes to reporting on it, it's a weird thing, because It's hard to be objective. You either have what many people are accustomed to with mainstream media, and that being anti-law enforcement. But then oftentimes, if it is a smaller community and there are personalities that are known and involved, and look, local news outlets did these real feel-good and I think completely warranted stories on the chief of police because of the health issues that he has had to overcome, and he's this human being that they know, and that can have an impact also when it comes to reporting and the decision. Well, we don't really want to make him look bad, and we know he's well-intended, so let's not do this story. And then you have this self-imposed censorship that is occurring. And one final thought also, I'm just trying to lay out the different perspectives here. Aside from citizens feeling uncomfortable, I mean, I suppose this would fall under that. There are a lot of citizens who are opposed to the cameras, but they don't want to be labeled as anti-law enforcement. There are people that love law enforcement, have a tremendous amount of respect for people in law enforcement and what it takes to be in law enforcement, the sacrifices that are necessary. And when directly confronted by people in law enforcement saying, here's how I feel about it, they're just worried that I will be erroneously painted or believed to be against law enforcement when I'm anything but. There's just a lot of reasons going about it in this manner I think doesn't ultimately long-term benefit anyone, even when it's completely 100% well-intended. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Springfield Livestock Marketing Center. Coming up tomorrow, we will be out at Mingles, the diner inside Springfield Livestock, for the Wednesday Roadshow. Now, doors open at 8, so hopefully we will see you out there. They will also have their weekly feeder sale Wednesday starting at 9 a.m. As always, if you can't make it out, they do offer live streaming and online bidding to just make it a little easier for you. And I do also want to mention, since it's on their calendar, they have something a little different coming up on Friday. They will host the Greene County National Wild Turkey Federation, and they are going to be doing their annual Hunting Heritage Banquet, and that's going to be upstairs in their community room. And that event will start at 5 p.m. Now, if you want more information on that event, or maybe you're like, ooh, that sounds like something I'd be interested in, you can purchase tickets at springfieldlivestock.com. And of course, you can always find all of the contact information for Springfield Livestock under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at KSGF.com.
On the flock cameras, one of the running themes, if you will, of those who are opposed to flock cameras are posting all of the horror stories that have occurred because of flock cameras, whether it is the misuse of it by people in law enforcement. There's a lot of tracking of ex-girlfriends and ex-wives and ex-husbands and ex-boyfriends. And some will note, well, that you can't simply point out the bad usage of it as a reason not to do it. I think, however, if you are going to tout a reason that we should have them, all of the good things that come along with it, then you do open up, but there are bad things as well. And then people can weigh the good versus the bad. There was a story, KY3, Have I Been Flocked? about a website that allows you to see if surveillance cameras have searched your vehicle. And the data from the cameras made available through Freedom of Information Act requests. The sources are made publicly available. The result. So apparently, you put in your license plate number, and KY3 notes that the results do not show if a vehicle passed by any of the flock cameras or what the device may have returned, but rather what searches of a license plate were performed by agencies that use the flock cameras. So apparently, I haven't tried this, but at the Have I Been Flocked website, and I think it's a .com. Let's see here. Yes, haveibeenflocked.com, that you will, if you type that in, you'll see what agencies have utilized your license plate information, though you won't necessarily know from what camera it came. Pimmer Roofing Company text line. The only question that needs answered is, are flock cameras constitutional? I would go perhaps a step further and note, even if it is, that doesn't mean it has to be done. And I think that a lot of times is something that, I don't know if you want to call it a trap, but a default, like, well, if it's constitutional, I guess that means that I have to support it. No, just because government can doesn't necessarily mean it should. Springfield's Talk 104.1 and good Tuesday, hour number 2. My name is Nick Reed. Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, all of your hardscaping needs, your landscaping needs. If you aren't really familiar with hardscaping or the term, it is generally the infrastructure. Maybe you think of retaining walls. For my family, it was an outdoor living space with a patio and a built-in fire pit. You can have outdoor kitchens done if you want to. I mean, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, they are the premier provider of the service here in the area. They, in addition, of course, as I mentioned, the hardscaping and the landscaping, drainage issues and lighting issues for your home, which gives it a tremendous amount of appeal. I don't think there aren't that many things for the dollar amount that you can do that improves the overall look of your home, particularly at night, obviously, as having lighting done and done properly. And also, it really truly is a safety feature. One of the things that folks will tell you when it comes to burglaries, people either who are former burglars or people who are experts in that area, law enforcement and otherwise, is that, lurking in the shadows, less shadows you have. I mean, if you are the house on the block that is illuminated, yeah, it looks nice unless you're a robber. You're going to find a house that's not that way. And so it helps with safety as well. HunterHardscapes.com. You can also find them under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. At the top of the hour, there was this ongoing story about the conditions on the USS Abraham Lincoln. And it's amazing. When there is a Republican in office, the media finds these stories about the deplorable conditions of people who are in the military. But once a Democrat is in power, these stories suddenly go away. And I think we know why. And there, these stories about some people that apparently were on the USS Abraham Lincoln, and it's been an extraordinarily long deployment, and so not necessarily ideal, but have taken to social media and complaining about this stuff. And then, of course, CNN manages to track down individuals that are in the military that were on or currently serve on that particular ship and, get them to complain. I've always been amazed, particularly with the use of social media on the internet, the things that people who serve in the military are allowed to get away with. This has popped up every so often. It doesn't always get the attention in the news. In my mind, that was a thing that just wasn't allowed because there is no upside whatsoever to our country to present to the world this image of people within our military demoralized, unhappy, complaining about the country. And it doesn't have anything to do with it just makes us look bad. It's what that making us look bad turns into. What do you think our enemies imagine when it comes to weighing any potential actual troops on the ground, combat against the United States, when the Chinese or the Russians or just any country that is all about a military that is filled with individuals that are turned into these killing machines for the purposes of being a strong military. And then they look at the United States and they get this portrayal of troops, U.S. personnel that are complaining because they don't like the food, that are griping about things that oftentimes an ungrateful teenager would gripe about. This isn't to say that the conditions are wonderful. This isn't to say, it's just to me insane that you would want to project an image of a military that is populated with young people that are so weak that they act like it's an injustice when things get a little bit uncomfortable. There are clearly situations and scenarios in which things going on internally in the military are perhaps counterproductive. They are not ideal. Maybe they're even straight up wrong. What we need are, and I'm sure some would acknowledge that there are mechanisms in place in which you go through a certain chain of command in order to try and address these concerns. And while some may say, well, it doesn't do any good, well, that sucks. But you know what else doesn't do any good? Broadcasting to our enemies that, this imagery of people that are so weak that they can't help but complain to the world about the conditions that they're in, because do you think that makes the enemy more or less likely to think that they can take us on? Joey Jones, who is he's a commentator on Fox News, and he's, many of you may recognize him, if not by name. He is the a veteran that is without legs because of the time that he served overseas. And he was on one of the shows on Fox News, and they were playing the clip of CNN interviewing one of these individuals and then his comments on it.
I mean, we'll say we're also pretty low. And not just in the division, in the ship entirely, we're pretty low on rations. I mean, at some points of the day, it would just be noodles and tuna mixed in together. And that was it. Sometimes we get a corn dog, sometimes we get a hot dog.
You know, you know what I ate in Afghanistan for 6 months on a burner with using a little burner? I ate ramen noodles. I had to pull the seasoning packet out because I had too much sodium in it, and I put tuna packets in it. That's what I ate. And you know what? I was happy to have it because the alternative was an MRE or something cooked by the Afghan guy who was too stupid to be given a gun, and they let him be the cook. And so if I wanted something spicy, test my fate a little bit, I'd go get a bowl of whatever he made in that giant, urn thing that he had. I mean, how weak are you on TV complaining about tuna and noodles? I'm sorry. You volunteered to serve your country. You can come back, get out of the military, and do like all of these Democrat veterans and complain about it and make commercials and be a sellout if you want to and come up with a new way of doing things. The last Democrat president that I remember that was deploying troops, Barack Obama, had the Army going to Iraq on patrol bases for 15 months at a time eating MREs. I'm sorry, but you're a sitting duck on a patrol base in Iraq, in Afghanistan, a heck of a lot more than you are on a fortified Navy ship sitting in the water. You might have got bored, and I'm sorry. We did have more fun getting in firefights, I'll say that. But to sit there and say that it was terrible because you had a corn dog and a hot dog, I would have traded a block of C4 to the Taliban for a hot dog by about July 2010. I just do not understand the mentality. If this is a representation of who our military is now, and I'm not saying it is, but there's at least enough for some of these trash rags to print about it. If this is who we are, we're just Rome sitting here waiting to burn. We've got nothing left. It makes me fume. If he sat there and said, we didn't have any clean water to drink, we couldn't take a shower. I mean, well, I didn't get to take a shower for about 6 months, but still, something that has something to do with hygiene or, like getting sick. There was a scurvy outbreak and, the guys that were missing legs were only given wooden pegs instead of metal ones. Then maybe I might have some sympathy. But to that little kid and whoever raised him, Lord, help you if you ever go into a hot war on the ground like millions of Americans have. I can only think what a World War II veteran sitting there who's lucid enough today to see that and think about the 6-month journey home from fighting the toughest war we've ever fought after being there for 4 years was thinking, listening to him complain like that. The Secretary of the Navy put out his response. That's my response. End of story.
The timing of this and the complaint regarding, quote, noodles and tuna and acting as if that is some sort of inhumane food offering for soldiers. I kid you not, I was planning on doing tuna casserole this week. That's what that is. It's tuna casserole. egg noodles or noodles of some type, and tuna, and of course, your breadcrumbs or your potato chips, however you want to make it, maybe some frozen peas in there. And I thought, because I was literally this week thinking, I think I'll make a tuna casserole, and then hearing that, described as something inhumane. It is about perception. And particularly my concerns, or even when we're dealing with Iran, and God forbid this talk about putting troops on the ground, and the Iranians wondering, okay, or the Chinese. We know that they have air superiority. We know that they have technological superiority. But what about when it comes down to the troops? Can we take them on? And when they are training their people, their soldiers, to be these brutal, heartless fighting machines, and then they see this? Again, I go back to, do we think that makes them more or less likely to think that they can take us on? You want the other side to fear your fierceness to such a degree that they don't want to even consider getting into a battle with you. And to have, of course, it's anti-Trump media, so we know why it's occurring, to take the opportunity to broadcast to our enemies this projection that hopefully, and as Joey Jones noted, this is surely not a large representation of those who are serving, but it certainly does to our enemies make them wonder. And that is, as some may think it's a ridiculous leap to say that it is a danger to our national security, to do something like this, to make these complaints verbal if you are serving, or to broadcast them. But it really truly is a national security situation when our enemies, they are formulating decision-making in terms of can they or can't they take us on? Are their troops, are they going to be superior and greater in fighting and have greater perseverance, have greater grit? And then they see this? That does not help our national security, and it does not diminish the likelihood that some foreign country might think that they can take us on. Springfield's Talk 1041, latest news update.
The husband just texted me because he was listening to what you were just talking about. He said, "Wait, they were allowed to have corn dogs?"
Well, see, I still can't get over the tuna casserole thing. Someone texted in the Pyramid Roofing Company text line. This is so perfectly true. Wait, weren't the Democrats just complaining about how much the military was spending on steak and
Yes,
lobsters
they
for our
were.
troops?
Yes, they were.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. CNN, the same outlet that is out there projecting our men and women as these weaklings that can't handle these deplorable tuna casseroles and hot dogs and corn dogs, were just last year pitching a fit over the fact that oftentimes those who are serving are treated to lobster and steak.
So what do they want them to have?
Right, yeah.
What do they want?
Whatever the opposite of what is occurring while Trump or any Republican is president. All right, weather?
Yes, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96, heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, we'll see a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97 and heat index values as high as 104. And for Thursday, a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
regarding CNN finding some little puke from the USS Abraham Lincoln to broadcast to the world how horrible morale is with our U.S. troops because they have to eat things like, quote, noodles and tuna, which, again, that's called tuna casserole, and hot dogs and corn dogs. 20 years in the Navy, we cleaned our own bathrooms, spooned out the weevils from cereal, etc. We would have never complained to anyone off the ship. That coming in on the Pyramid Roofing Company text line. Another noting, if tuna casserole is suffering, you did not grow up poor enough. I don't even consider it to be something that is for poor people. I like tuna casserole.
I haven't had tuna casserole in a long time.
It's really good. I made it. So because of our schedules, I'm generally the one who does dinner for the family. I do the grocery shopping and I enjoy it for the most part. I mean, sometimes like, what am I going to do? But I forget about the tuna casserole, even though when I've made it, my wife is like, this is one of my favorite things that you make. It's some of it is the culture. It's crazy. The entitled, spoiled mentality of some of these people. And you wonder, why does somebody like that even go into the military other than they were forced to or they thought it would be fun? Their parents forced them to do it, or maybe it was that, or avoid going to jail. I don't know how often that's still done. It seems like that was a cliche at one point that you get nabbed doing something illegal one too many times, and you have the choice either to sign up and enlist in the military or to go to jail. I don't know how often that happened. It just seemed like that was sort of something that was a thing for a period of time. A lot of it, I can only imagine the challenges. I have a brother-in-law who's a drill sergeant, so I hear the stories. And my stepfather was a drill sergeant, and that was during the Vietnam era, and he had served over in Vietnam as well. And the differences, as someone who is an outsider, never served in the military, Cub Scouts closest thing for me, and ringing a bell for the Salvation Army. So I pretty much know exactly what it's like. But the difference is in the stories that I would hear in the very, very limited conversations that my stepdad would ever have about such a thing versus the stories I hear now. Having, again, drill sergeants in the family, it's a whole different world. And, these, I don't know, it just is scary. Plus, you think about the culture, and once upon a time, it was pretty universal. You loved the country, Republican, Democrat, black, white, poor, rich, whatever. And so, unless it was a drafting situation, looking at those, in Vietnam, which a majority of those who served in Vietnam actually did voluntarily enlist. But, there was some drafting that took place during that period of time. But still, it was like the way that I've always understood it, it was all about loving the country. Love this country, serve the country. And when we increasingly, through our public schools, indoctrinate young people to hate the country, and a significant number of those individuals get into the military, it isn't because they don't view it as the same. They don't see it as, what is my goal here? My goal is to best serve the country. And so when you culturally have this environment in which it's populated with people who love the country, they're not going to complain about such things, because it's almost like you'll complain internally about your family, but nobody else had better badmouth your brothers or you may fight. You have fist fights with your brother, your stepbrother, your cousins, but you're the first one to get into the dog pile if someone throws a punch at that same individual that you can't stand half the time, because it's family. And you put on a united front because ultimately family is family. And the idea that you would have some of these people that are, quote, serving our country, because in their minds, I've come to believe that's not what they're doing in their minds. They're serving themselves. They are getting something out of it. They're doing it for them. You really would hear that theme a lot when it came to transgender serving, and, well, I should have a right. Why can't I? The military is not about you. That is not what the military is about. It's not a camp. It isn't a place for you to go feel fulfilled about yourself. It isn't a place for you to, live this life that is, some sort of romanticized fantasy that you've had about being. That's not what it's not for you. It's not about you. It is only about you to the degree that your existence helps the mission. And once you are running counter to that, to me, not only are you not serving the country, but you are serving against it. You're serving the enemy. And this entitled attitude of, I should be able to trash on the morale of my fellow soldiers and sailors and trash on my country while serving is a frightening insight into the mindset of why it is, or more importantly, why it isn't, that some of these people are serving in the first place. Now, let's hope, and I believe that there's truth to this, despite the media's attempt to portray this as some sort of widespread problem that is symbolic of the military under Donald Trump, and that is a completely demoralized military is a false representation based off of some hand-picked complainers that are entitled spoiled brats. And let's just lean into that, shall we? Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Couple of your before traffic. Pyramid Roofing Company text line messages from Joe. Poor folks, tuna casserole is a box of Always Safe mac and cheese, 1 can of Always Safe green beans, and a can of Always Safe tuna. Another, I'm not going to say the name of the individual, lest his wife listening. Texting in, one time my ex-wife. Okay, so, well, still. One time my ex-wife made tuna casserole but forgot to put the tuna in. So, what would that be?
It's just casserole.
Breadcrumbs or chips, frozen, like you'd have peas, some other sort of. I'm trying to think what all goes into it. I mean, yeah, without the tuna, that would be quite lacking. And then one other. Let's see. I already read that. Somebody noting pre-Hegseth military was a dumpster fire. All right. Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447 KSGF now for a traffic update. By the way, they launched salsa on Wednesday. This is getting Mexican Villa.
Uh-huh.
This is getting actually really surprised me, the amount of social media chatter that it was getting, because they've always had sauce.
Yeah.
As opposed to salsa, they've got their mild sauce, their sweet sauce, and their hot sauce.
Famous hot sauce.
Yes, which we always have some of that at the house because it's my wife's favorite. And so they decided after 75 years, they're going to add to their lineup the salsa. And I haven't tried it yet. I'm going to go buy.
I bet it's really good.
Yeah, people are really liking it. It will, I believe, eventually be available in stores as their sauces are. But I had asked because they were represented at the Golden Fork Awards I talked about earlier. I said, well, can I buy it to go? Oh, yeah, you can get like a gallon jug if you want to go. So I'm going to go, I think, pick some up today, in fact. But yeah, so those of you that maybe always miss the salsa in lieu of the sauce with your chips at Mexican Villa, salsa now is available. There you have it.
Very exciting.
Just wanted to mention that because, the voice guy talking about the official taco morning show.
Yes. The first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96, heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97, heat index values reaching up to 104. And for Thursday, a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
Melania Trump has, for some time now during this second administration, been working back channels to get actual Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped by the Russians reunited with their parents. And according to the numbers, she has now reunited another Ukrainian child with the child's family. This is the 34th such joyful homecoming that she's facilitated as the war with Russia continues. The First Lady said in a statement yesterday, there's nothing more powerful than reuniting a mother with her child after an extended period of time. My representative and I are focused on helping facilitate the next reunification of individuals who have been separated from their loved ones because of the war between Ukraine and Russia. Earlier this month, Trump announced that she, that being Melania, and her team had helped a fifth group of Ukrainian Russian children being united with loved ones. The Russian youngers have been living in Ukraine with their families before the war started and got separated from kin. As for Ukrainian children, thousands have been taken from homes and orphanages, mainly in the occupied east of the country, to Russia since Moscow launched the full-scale invasion in February of 2022. And so it isn't just Ukraine. The most recent was the Ukrainian children. So her humanitarian efforts here are for children of both sides, reuniting Russian kids with Russian parents, and then reuniting Ukrainian kids with Ukrainian parents. And, this is something that really got started when Melania had asked President Trump, he was going to meet with Putin, give Putin this letter. I want you to give him this letter. And it was pleading to him or making some sort of offer regarding the facilitation of reuniting these kids with the families. And Putin responded by noting that Melania had, quote, had a, quote, open channel of communication with him and the First Lady. And so this is something she's been doing, and I say quietly. She doesn't seek a tremendous amount of attention for it. When there is a reunification, she does make note of it. But many of you may not have even realized that this is something she's been doing for some time. And the reason I would argue most Americans don't even know this is happening is because the media doesn't give it any coverage. These are real, meaningful efforts with real, meaningful results that because of Melania Trump, there are parents who have welcomed their children back. Unless a parent has been through this, As a human being, you can't fully understand what it must be like to. When you think about if you have a loved one that is a prisoner of war, and the awful concerns, just trying to sleep at night and waking up in the morning. I just can't imagine that. But it being your child, and you already probably have an idea whether it's warranted or not at how evil the enemy is and the depraved things that they will do, and I just can't even fathom that. And dozens now of these kids are back at home on both sides because of Melania's effort. They are back in their beds. They are back with their families. Their families are tucking them in instead of crying themselves to sleep at night. And the amount of attention this gets with the mainstream media is virtually nothing. And I can't help but compare and contrast to the gushing coverage Michelle Obama got because she tweeted out a hashtag, bring them home, when the terrorist organization Boko Haram, remember they raided that Christian, I think it was a school, and 100, 200 of these Christian schoolgirls were kidnapped, believed to, because of the reputation of Boko Haram, that these girls in all likelihood were being raped, were being sold off, were being used as sex slaves. And Michelle Obama's participation in getting these children reunited back with their parents was to have a picture of her taken with a pouty face, holding up a little sign with a hashtag. And internationally, she was hailed as some sort of great guiding light in an effort to get these girls back. I grabbed, there was a Vanity Fair piece. There were pieces all over the place. I don't know if you remember this happening or not. I mean, just people gushing, oh, she's so inspirational because she did a selfie. That was it. You compare that to Melania Trump and the actual back channel, hard negotiations, I'm sure at times work, in getting kids actually back to their parents. And the minimal, if even non-existent on some networks, coverage that gets. I want to read to you. Well, actually, got a traffic update. I want to share with you some of the Vanity Fair piece at the time titled "How Michelle Obama Joined a Global Campaign to Bring Back Our Girls," and compare what little she did and the gushing coverage it got versus the meaningful work Melania is doing and how little coverage it's actually getting. Which, again, all of this shows that the children, when it comes to people on the left of the media, they don't care about them unless they can be used to benefit their own political ambitions, or or in a case where it may work against them, in other words, make Melania Trump look like a decent human being, they totally ignore it. Brookline Door Works. Average garage door. Your average garage door. This is residential. Gets used about 3,000 times per year. This is important. And I know you think, well, that math, that doesn't seem to add up. You think about every time you use it twice. It goes up and it goes down. And if you have a garage, odds are that gets more use than your actual front door. Every time somebody comes over, you take the trash out, up, down, 3,000 times a year. Now, that's significant because most springs have a lifespan of about 10,000 uses. So you're talking just about a little over 3 years. Now, of course, it can go well beyond that. But that's sort of when you are just buying your time. Some of the biggest contributing factors to the spring snapping include temperature changes, which clearly we have that working against us here. Extra friction and resistance and lack of routine maintenance. If your door squeaks, something's not operating properly. You need a checkup. Brookline Door Works. That's who I recommend. Lube and tune services. And if you're thinking, well, WD-40, that makes the sound go away. You're covering up the symptom. The problem continues to get worse. WD-40 can actually break down components and make the problem worse. Brookline Door Works. Whether you need a brand new garage door or that routine maintenance or the spring breaks 24-hour service, brooklinedoorworks.com. Melania Trump has been consistently working successfully in a meaningful way to get children both from Russia and Ukraine reunited with their families. Other than your Fox News and New York Post, really not much attention is paid. If so, it's just a brief little story. And I remember how the media gushed over Michelle Obama, posting a pouty-faced picture of herself on social media, holding up a sign with a hashtag, and she was just treated as if she was the Joan of Arc of saving kidnapped children. I found Vanity Fair did an entire piece on Michelle Obama, posting a picture. I thought I'd share some of it with you. Michelle Obama was upstairs in the White House residential quarters, watching the morning news reports of a story of suffering in social media and wondering whether to tweet. It was May 7th, 2014, an overcast Wednesday in Washington, and all the major breakfast shows were leading with the same harrowing tale. Thousands of miles away in a remote Nigerian town called Chibok, 276 schoolgirls had been kidnapped from their dormitory on the night before their final exams. They'd been dozing on bunk beds, studying notes, or reading the Bible by flashlight. They were high school seniors, a few hours of test questions from graduating as some of the only educated young women in an impoverished region where most girls had never learned to read. Then a group of militants barged in, bundled them onto trucks, sped into the forest. The students had become captives of a little-known terrorist organization called Boko Haram, which filled its ranks by abducting children. The girls' parents chased after them on motorbikes and on foot until the trail went cold. For weeks, few people seemed to notice. The schoolgirls looked set to be forgotten. New entries on a long list of stolen youth. But this time, something mysterious aligned inside the algorithms that power the attention economy. A small band of Nigerian activists on Twitter coined a hashtag calling for the hostages' immediate release. Though the unpredictable pinball mechanics of social media, it shot out of West Africa and into the celebrity sphere, boosted by Hollywood and hip-hop royalty, then captured the global imagination. People all over the world began retweeting the same clarion call, hashtag, bring back our girls. The network news found the story irresistible. Anchors choked up, retelling a tragic sequence of events that seemed to connect the world's richest and poorest people through the universal pain of parental loss. A class of teenagers had been studying towards a better life, chasing aspirations that made them not so different from ordinary Americans whose own high schools knew the ever-present danger of adolescent gun violence. Now these girls were trapped in a ghastly, faintly understood conflict far away, hostages to unambiguous evil. More than that, they needed your help. Here was a chance to take part in the crowdsourced liberation of more than 200 innocent victims terrorized for their determination to learn. Watching the news reports upstairs, the First Lady felt the same wrench of empathy that millions of others would express online. Those could be my daughters. Michelle dialed her chief of staff, Tina Chen, a Twitter skeptic. Wasn't expecting the call. A lawyer by training, careful and attuned to unforeseen risks, she didn't have an account and wasn't sure that Twitter.com was a presidential enough platform for the First Lady. Once a tweet went live, you couldn't control what happened. Michelle, too, harbored reservations about social media and how much she should put herself out there. She had never made a major statement on foreign affairs, let alone waded into a war. What if her tweeting about Boko Haram made the situation worse? But this story moved her. It was a moral issue, she would tell a friend, bigger than foreign policy. On her office bookshelf, next to a picture of her daughter, sat I Am Malala, the memoir of the Pakistani activist for girls' education who had recently visited the White House. I think I want to do this, she told Tina. I want to do this. Her media team scrambled to choreograph the tweet. Staff hurried office supplies into the White House diplomatic room, trial and error testing Twitter photos in the same circular reception hall where Franklin Roosevelt once recorded his fireside chats. Michelle's aides fumbled with different-sized placards, attempting to find a board of optimal dimensions, and tested out Sharpies to see how thick the marker should be for legibility on a small screen. They debated whether the press secretary should snap the picture on her phone, or maybe an official White House photographer should set up his professional camera. Michelle descended the staircase in a red, white, and blue floral dress, rushing to a personal appointment. The motorcade was waiting, but she could do this fast. Standing opposite a portrait of George Washington, she stared intently into the photographer's lens, gripping a pearly white placard, #BringBackOurGirls. She dashed into her car while an aide typed up her caption and clicked tweet. Our prayers are with the missing Nigerian girls and their families. It's time to #BringBackOurGirls, MO, for Michelle Obama. That modest gesture was liked or retweeted by some 179,000 people and seen by hundreds of millions across the world, becoming the most shared post of a frenzy campaign that tested the power of social media to reshape events thousands of miles away. In the space of a few weeks, 2 million Twitter users with a tap of the screen repeated the same demand. This was a shared purpose proclaimed by ordinary people from every corner of the map. Some of the world's most famous names, Hollywood celebrities, prime ministers, rap stars, the Pope, Ellen, Angelina Jolie, Oprah, Harrison Ford, David Cameron, Mary J. Blige, The Rock, and quite possibly you. A day short of 3 years later, the skies above northeastern Nigeria were empty except for one solitary aircraft. A soft rain streaked the windows of a Russian helicopter juddering through gray clouds. And then it goes into 3 years later, a rescue taking place this was before Russians were scary and evil. So they could, be written as heroic in this Vanity Fair piece. You listen to how they took a meaningless gesture in terms of actual results, posting a picture, and turned it into this scene of some movie as if that the actions were going to somehow save hundreds of girls whose lives were in the balance, and the romanticizing that was crafted through the wording, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, of how wonderful and heroic Michelle Obama was for deciding to post a picture of herself holding up a placard saying #BringHomeTheGirls, something that she didn't even come up with. And that did absolutely nothing to actually save the girls. You juxtapose that to the way that the media dismisses and ignores Melania Trump month after month after month, working back channels to actually get kids home to their parents who have been lost in the war between Ukraine and Russia. It is a further demonstration, yet again, that when it comes to any subject matter, including missing children, The left and the media does not care about them unless they can be used in order to benefit their own political purposes. I've asserted in the past, and I stick with this. I don't believe there has been any high profile individual in this country that has been so undeservingly criticized and ridiculed as Melania Trump. There have, I'm sure, been those who have been as ridiculed and as mocked. But Melania Trump has never, this is a woman who doesn't say bad things about people. She doesn't hit out at people. She doesn't even talk politics. You know, her efforts are always focused, particularly with this administration, of reuniting kids with their loved ones that are lost in these war-torn scenarios. And, you know, she's an immigrant who speaks 7 languages. You know, we're told by the left that you know, we're supposed to love more than anyone people who come to this country as immigrants. Yet there's no one that the left trashes on to the degree they do with her, who deserves it so less. Springfield's Talk 1041. Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Nick Reed. The WNBA admits security in Atlanta was wrong to make fans cover shirts at the Dream Fever game. This was these high-profile WNBA games are just becoming almost redundant in these offenses that are occurring. Now, aside from that part of it, there was a foul that was at one point called against Caitlin Clark regarding what she was called a foul against Angel Reese, and then it was such a clear non-foul. The commentators were like, well, I'll be stunned if this isn't overturned. And it wasn't overturned. And the ref, in fact, even during the announcement, did what is not typically done. And instead of just noting the player, called her out by name, which apparently is a no-no. You don't personalize these calls. And she specifically said Caitlin Clark's name. But not, it again just becomes the things that end up getting talked about most regarding the WNBA are all of these screw-ups by the refs, by the coaches, and all of this transgender stuff. And so what happened was you had a mother and her teenage daughter wearing the XXXY athletic shirts. Now, this is a company that promotes the civil rights of girls and their ability to play against only other girls without men identifying as girls, then, getting to play against them and take showers with them and so forth. XXXY, that's the chromosome for girl, woman, female. It's a scientific definition. And security came and told them that they either had to cover their shirts or leave. As you can imagine, like so many of these instances in which girls or women who are standing up for girls' civil rights at these WNBA events begins to blow up. Suddenly the WNBA, they sort of try to back off a little bit and dampen down the anger. And so they've released a statement saying the WNBA is aware of interactions at last night's game in Atlanta in which fans were asked by league security to cover their shirts. This should not have happened. The Atlanta Dream believes in creating a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. Unfortunately, at last night's game, WNBA security took action that fell short of that standard. At no point was Dream personnel involved in that decision made by WNBA security. And we've heard of similar situations like this occur in which security gets blamed or someone who's not part of the organization that is the focus is on, WNBA in this instance. They wipe their hand. They're like, hey, no, we don't agree with this. Security. And what always gets left out, as it is for this situation, why did security feel if according to the WNBA, there was absolutely no communication whatsoever that would make these security guards feel as if they had the authority to kick out a mother and daughter if they did not cover up their scientific definition of women t-shirts? Why did they think that they could? Why? And what happened to these individuals? If we're to believe, as the Atlanta Dream and the WNBA is positioning itself here, is that you had these rogue security guards that decided to target these women because of, I guess, their political beliefs. I'm talking about from the guards' perspective, for reasons we don't even know. What was done about it? Were they asked why they tried to throw these individuals out? Were they asked if they were under some sort of illusion that they had the authority? Did somebody tell them to do this that didn't have the authority? Who was that person? This isn't an uncommon tactic whenever this sort of thing occurs, which the people who are in charge wipe their hands clean and say it had nothing to do with us. Oh, yes, in fact, this is completely unacceptable. But we never find out what happened to the offenders. I'm talking about the security guards. And I suspect that we all know the answer. Why? It's because nothing whatsoever happened to these individuals. How can that be? If I'm running an organization and I'm paying security, and security targets a couple of people because they don't like their T-shirts that they perhaps feel are political and decide to take it upon themselves to tell them that they don't have the right to wear that messaging on their shirt, or if you don't, we will throw you out. And guess what I'm going to do with those people? First off, I'm going to find out who the hell they think they are and under what authority they felt that they had the right to do it, just for my own curiosity. And then I'm showing them the door. I'm going to guess that probably isn't happening here with the WNBA. By the way, in overtime, the Fever beat the Dream, largely because right before the initial clock for standard play time ended, Angel hilariously missed what should have been an absolute easy shot under the basket. And what has gone viral is afterwards, there as Angel Reese is you could see it on her face. She knows that it was an absolute easy shot that she screwed up, and you see walking behind her Caitlin Clark just laughing her head off about the whole thing. Springfield's Talk 104.1, latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96, heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, we'll see a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97 and heat index values as high as 104. And for Thursday, a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
Sarah Myers.
Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. We're in the middle of summer. It's hot. It's gross. Your AC is running nonstop. And typically, whenever your AC runs constantly, that's when breakdowns occur. And hopefully that doesn't happen to you. But if that does happen, I want to recommend the best of the best. And that's Russell and his team over at Foreman Mechanical. They're very honest about the work that will need to be done. And they work on all major brands. They do residential and commercial services. And they can do anything from just your simple maintenance to brand new unit installs. So if you do have AC issues, make sure that you reach out to Russell, schedule that appointment. You can always find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
A couple of more or additional angles here regarding the WNBA just attempting to destroy everything that is happening beneficial to the organization. Caitlin Clark, of course, long being the one target, then Sophie Cunningham becoming the new target or additional target. Reddit, which is, it's a left-wing echo chamber, has banned Sophie Cunningham's name from its WNBA forum. You know, the left that is so worried about the First Amendment and claim that right-wingers are book burners and they're against censorship, have banned people from talking about Sophie Cunningham. And, of course, the reason is obvious, because there is a significant presence of individuals weighing in on platforms like Reddit that are defending women's and girls' civil rights when it comes to this particular issue. And Sophie Cunningham is one of those individuals. What happens and why this is so problematic for the left, and this is really surfaced with former NBA players announcing that they were going to participate in the draft, that they want to get drafted to the WNBA as they now identify as women, is that this is such an obvious case of science and truth being on one side, that any sort of discussion that involves facts leads just an objective observer to recognizing and understanding the truth. And so, like most things with the left, they try to shut down the conversation because conversations don't benefit them. Conversations that involve different perspectives and point and counterpoints result in their side losing. And this is why they censor. This is why they name call and scream and yell, because they do not want people who are perhaps undecided, or even worse yet, people on their side for the first time hearing some of this factual information. So they just shut it down. Charlemagne the God slammed the debate over transgender participation in women's sports, particularly the WNBA, during his Brilliant Idiots podcast Sunday, saying the conversation was ridiculous. He said, "I don't know why this is becoming a story again, and I cannot believe that people are falling for tricks like this right before the midterm election. This is so dumb for Democrats to even go back down this road having this conversation." Well, there's two questions to be answered here. One, his apparent lack of recognition as to why this has come up again, because a left-wing reporter from ESPN asked Sophie Cunningham how she felt on the issue. This is part of the litmus test that is presented to high-profile people in our society by the left wing. You have to pledge your loyalty. See, Sophie Cunningham is becoming very, very popular. And she had not, because she doesn't go around spewing politics. It's something that she doesn't talk about. So we don't know how she feels about this. Well, we better make sure that she's on the right side of this issue, so we need to ask her this question. Well, she didn't answer the way that they wanted. See, she gave the wrong answer. And the way that the left operates is they give people a chance to clarify. They give people who give the wrong answer, particularly if you are a minority, if you are a member of the LGBT community, or you are a woman, and you give an answer that demonstrates you're not obedient and you don't know your place. They give you a get-out-of-free-jail card by asking the question again, asking you to comment on people who have been hurt, who are accusing you of being anti-this and anti-that. If you could clarify what it was that you meant. And Sophie Cunningham committed the ultimate sin. And she's like, I said what I said and I meant it. I support protecting girls in sports. And even worse, she appeared completely unaffected by all of the noise. That's what the left really hates. When they come for you, they want to see the fear in your eyes. Even if you don't necessarily fear them, you fear losing sponsors. You fear, what are the fans going to say? You fear losing your street cred. With Sophie Cunningham, none of that existed. They didn't even really necessarily see defiance. They saw indifference to their outrage. And a woman who doesn't know her place, a woman who is not obedient, this is the thing that makes the left go apoplectic. So when Charlemagne, perhaps rhetorically saying, I have no idea, why is this even becoming an issue again? Because the left brought it up as a litmus test to see whether or not Sophie Cunningham needed to be burned at the stake. And so this is what we're seeing, because she gave the wrong answer. Now, the second comment he made, it's not a question so much, but it should be addressed. He said, I cannot believe people are falling for tricks like this right before the midterm election. This is so dumb for Democrats to even be going down this road having this conversation. There are some Democrats or Democrat sympathetic individuals that are frustrated with Democrats on this because they feel as if they're being tricked into an issue that they lose on. As if Republicans are the ones who are going around asking people how they feel about this debate as a litmus test. This isn't a trap that is set by conservatives or Republicans in order to trick Democrats into talking about an issue that 80% of Americans are against them on. This is the Democrats bringing up the issue. They're setting their own trap. And to view it as the left being tricked into talking about this is complete denial. Because they would rather believe that the Democrats' level of stupidity is confined to being tricked by others with a nefarious purpose, that being Republicans, we're going to get them to talk about this, as opposed to the level of stupidity required for Democrats to bring it up themselves. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, it's your turn, I think, right? Oh, no, it's not your turn.
It is not
it's
my
not your
turn.
turn. Okay, coming up. This is what happens when I talk.
When you're yammering during break.
During the we have 2.5 minutes of commercials, and I wait until the last 15 seconds to start talking to you about something. So, well, I'll get to give you a better version of what I was saying here as we get into the next break after traffic. But I do want to talk about some of these revelations regarding what the FBI knew about Swalwell and the compromised position that he was in with Fang Fang, and apparently even included him in exchange for cash, letting her handpick interns that would be in his office at a time that we know that the communist Chinese were trying to infiltrate congressional offices with staffers and interns and so forth. And why it is that the FBI did not go after him for it. Now, to me, that question isn't answered, but I can tell you the answer to that. All of that coming up. Traffic update now.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 96 and heat index values as high as 101. Tonight mostly clear with a low around 74. For your Wednesday, a slight chance for showers in the afternoon, otherwise partly cloudy with a high near 97, heat index values as high as 104. And for Thursday, a slight chance for showers in the morning and then mostly sunny with a high near 90.
We were talking before we get to the Swalwell stuff in the previous segment about podcasts on Sunday, Charlemagne the God, complaining about, why is this trans stuff coming up again in the context of the WNBA? And the answer is because left-wing press demanded Sophie Cunningham take a stance on it. And they did that they asked the question, and they know what they're doing. This is to make sure she understands her place. And when she didn't, this is when all hell broke loose. And Ed had texted in that Red Eye Radio was talking about this very thing. Dems are saying they need to stop talking about it, but they're the ones who keep bringing it up. Presumably, they're fully backing the issue. The left does not have emotional discipline. this is what at times creates a scenario in which they become their own worst enemies. It's also sometimes well before I was ever doing talk, in my mind at least, I remember people when Rush Limbaugh would talk about, well, here's what the left should do, or if they would just do or stop doing this. People like, stop telling them what to do, and it's like they can't help themselves. Even when you put out there, I mean, look at this issue, the trans issue. 80% of Americans are on the same page here. So you would think if there was any sort of emotional maturity that the Democrat Party would be like, okay, this is clearly something we need to drop. And they even talked about it during the so-called autopsy of the last presidential election, that was one of the issues that they had to stop talking about. They cannot help themselves. Incidentally, this is a characteristic that should not be common amongst people who have to make very important decisions. It's one of the reasons that people on the left are such bad leaders, because they're emotionally driven. They cannot help themselves. Even when there is something that is so clearly, even against their own interest, their emotional reactions, they are very immature, and they cannot stop themselves. And even if it runs counter to what in their minds they know, like they'll talk about it in a moment of sanity, and when the emotion is sapped out of it, that they can acknowledge, yeah, this is not a winning issue for us. This is causing us to lose. Man, once they get hyped up, they can't help themselves. Zero discipline. They have the emotional maturity of a toddler. And that's why they can't help it. I mean, they just cannot help it. FBI had evidence Swalwell got illegal donations from suspected Chinese spy. Well, of course. I mean, new information has been revealed. The files provide significant new details about the long-rumored relationship between Feng Feng and Swalwell, including some of the following. The FBI initially planned to investigate Swalwell for a bribery scheme in which he exchanged cash for the Chinese spy to plant interns in his office. But eventually the FBI decided to narrow the case to seek criminal charges only against Feng for making illegal donations to the California Democrat through conduits. Increasingly, we learn of behavior from elected officials that, and I don't use this term lightly, but I kind of feel like falls under the category of treason, giving aid and comfort to our enemy. When you, according to the information, the evidence the FBI had at the time, have identified a member of Congress who sits on a committee that deals with top secret information. When all of this stuff came out, Republicans booted him off, but Democrats put him right back on. And this guy was allowing a Chinese spy to pick his interns in exchange for cash? I'm beginning to think that this whole concept of treason has become completely irrelevant, because what, to me, seems at the very least to be enough to charge someone with treason. You know, they still have the right to the day in court and everything, part of our judicial system, but we don't even charge these people with this stuff anymore. When you're taking cash from an enemy country and then allowing one of their spies to put interns in your office, and I don't believe for a minute that he didn't know she was doing what she was doing. You know, he gets dismissed as being an idiot. Like, why on earth would randomly this hot Chinese chick with, her parents were part of the communist government and just randomly want to start having sex with him? And so you and I look at it like, how can he be such an idiot? I think he at the very least, he had to suspect. I don't think he cared. The Democrat Party is not exactly populated with people who love our country. And so here's a guy that has the chance to have no strings attached sex with some hot foreign chick, and all he, and to get some money at the same time, and all he has to do is put some of her interns and maybe feed her a little information once in a while. To me, that is far more likely and plausible than him being completely obtuse to what was going on. A natural question is, well, why would the FBI decide to approach it as if he was an innocent victim in all of this, even though initially their plan was to focus on him as being instrumental in the bribery scheme? I contend that the culture of the FBI, particularly under James Comey, was proven to be corrupt. And when you are a corrupt organization, it benefits you to have compromised individuals in office. So you can do one of two things when you have this information. You can either do what you're supposed to do as a law enforcement agency and go after them, or you can quietly sit on it and bring it out for a day you need a favor from that member of Congress. The revealed files also showed Swalwell admitted to having sex with Fang, his staff placing Fang's interns in Congress, and not having a strong enough campaign finance system to detect the straw donors she allegedly passed through U.S. citizen conduit. So he and his staff apparently played the card that Democrats always play when they get caught doing something that was potentially illegal, and they play dumb. Hillary Clinton destroying evidence that was subpoenaed. Well, I just didn't know. I had no idea. Every time votes get found or thumb drives with votes end up like we saw in in Wisconsin last week in the gubernatorial primary there. You have 5 of the 9 thumb drives show up with no votes on them whatsoever, so they have to go put them on. And, it's just an accident, human error. We're just incompetent. The Justice Department, the files note, also declined to prosecute Fang despite strong evidence of the illegal donations after she fled the U.S. as the FBI began interviewing her associates and raided her home. The early steps in the investigation were overseen in part by Jack Smith. Yes, that Jack Smith, who would later put his target on Donald Trump for criminal charges. So here he decides not to go after the Chinese spy who compromised a member of Congress because Donald Trump was much more important. The files revealed the FBI was recruiting Fang to be a confidential informant through an undercover agent assigned her the codename Rusty Thumbs, planned to hire her through a cutout company, and was still evaluating her suitability as a confidential human source when they discovered her alleged criminal behavior. Now, that apparently is how they ended up realizing that Swalwell was intertangled with her, because they were investigating her first, and it led to Swalwell. The FBI also knew early on during the recruitment attempt that Fang was tied to China's Ministry of State Security, known as the MSS, Beijing's notorious intelligence service. The Bureau also identified her parents as MSS agents. Knew she was raising money for California Democrats, plural, and was willing to use sex as a means of getting ahead in the world of U.S. politics. Swalwell's office, when so some of this first came out in 2020 from Axios, and when it came to releasing some of these documents, Swalwell's office told Axios at the time of the investigation that he had fully cooperated with the FBI and has reiterated that claim for years, and has subsequently threatened to sue the FBI if they released any of this information. So, it's just another winning member of the Democrat Party. And let's note, despite all of that, along with what we also know was an open secret that Swalwell was abusive towards women, sexually and physically. It wasn't until they feared he might throw a wrench in their efforts to retain power in the governorship at California that they decided to throw him overboard. Notice when they decided that they were going to torpedo his campaign for the purposes of retaining political power, that they used the allegations of sexual violence and rape, which still waiting to hear if he's going to get charged for any of this stuff, but they left out all of the communist Chinese spy stuff. Given that, according to the FBI files, it wasn't just Swalwell, but numerous California Democrats she was involved with, I think we can understand why the Democrats didn't use that angle. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. The Pyramid Roofing Company spoke to Josh last week, and one thing that he wants to let everyone know is that with the hotter weather, they are still working, still getting to sites around 6 a.m., but because of the extreme heat that we've experienced over the last couple of days, they're having to take a lot more breaks, makes sense, and they can't handle as many jobs in a day. So a normal job that would take, just a typical day is now taking about a day and a half, sometimes two, and just Josh wanted to keep you in the loop on that. Now, if it is time to have the Pyramid Roofing team out to your home or to your business, reach out to Josh, schedule that free roof inspection. You can always find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
I want to play a bit of audio. Given the landscape of the Democrat Party, 99% of high-profile Democrats embracing supporters of terrorism, including candidates that openly say that all of those Americans who lost their lives on 9/11 had it coming. El Sayed, of course, one of his best friends and campaign surrogates, Hakeem Piker, being one of those individuals. C-SPAN had former Biden aide. I think he was also at one point Jill Biden's press guy or something. I don't know. He's part of the Biden world. He's a longtime Democrat. And he was on C-SPAN talking about Abdul El Sayed and how he couldn't support the guy. And so C-SPAN allows callers to call in. Got a Democrat line, independent line, Republican line. And a guy called in on the Democrat line scolding this individual. LaRosa is his name. He said, you come on a national show, you say that a must-win state like Michigan has an unfit candidate in El Sayed. As a Democrat strategist coming on a national program, I think it's totally unacceptable. You're doing a disservice and just really ripping the guy. How can you as a Democrat say that El Sayed is not fit to run when it's such an important race for Democrats? This was his response.
Well, I've never supported a Republican in my life, for the Senate, for the White House, for Congress. And I don't live in Michigan, so, my opinion really doesn't matter that much. But I could never support El Sayed for a couple of reasons. One, there's certain things that do transcend politics, that do transcend parties. And that's okay. That's what I was saying. Vote blue no matter who. The problem with that is who still matters. At least it matters to me. And I just come from a time when I watched people jumping out of windows on 9/11, 70 miles from when the towers were falling and burning for 3 months. We could smell it from where I was from in Pennsylvania because of how the wind blew. It's personal to me, and 25 years later, somebody who can't stand up to his friends online, on streamers. I don't even know who these people are, but if you're too cowardly and too weak to stand up to somebody who justifies terrorism, who justifies 9/11, who justifies the suffering of people. All those people did was show up for work that day or showed up on an airplane. And this guy doesn't have it in him to say it's wrong to say that or to stand up to his friends. The test of leadership is not standing up to the other side. That's easy to do. Standing up to your friends, and he's too much of a coward to do it.
This has become a real problem for what I would say are Democrats that don't embrace terrorism, and that is, where do they go? There is a level of denialism that I understand. They still believe that the socialists and the embracers of terrorism and violence within their party are just a few bad apples that they need to that need to be made to go away, as opposed to activists that are not only taking over the party but are leading it culturally. And it is a bad place. I genuinely feel for them, because, and I feel for the country, because unfortunately what a lot of Democrats are going to do is they're just going to assimilate themselves into being allies with terrorists, as some of them are already doing. If you're an individual like this longtime Democrat who does not support terrorism, who does not think America had 9/11 coming, but you also don't believe in the political values of the Republican Party, what do you do? Where do you go? It's like Republicans who want, to eliminate the debt and get spending under control. We're in kind of the same position now. Our evil wing, if you will, of the party has a spending problem, while yours has a terrorism problem. I'd say lesser of two evils are the bad players within the Republican Party. My fear that with Democrats that are not evil, violent, embracing Democrats, without an alternative for them that fits their political ideology, they will just hold their nose and they will assimilate into what the party is evolving into, and that is a party that supports terrorism and political violence. And that's not good for the country. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, just straight up tell you can go read the reviews. I recommend you do it. She is the best. And with Will, her husband, also working by her side, and he handles those large land purchases. If you are, cattle farmer, ranch hand, ranchman, woman, whatever, and you are looking for all of that land and bodies of water and barns and everything that come along with it, different area of expertise, and that's his area of expertise. So you're covered across the board. Whether you're looking to buy or sell, you will get the absolute 100% best in the area you can get with Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Speaking of El Sayed, his one of his campaign directors for I think it's the northern part of Michigan, responded to Mike Rogers, who's the Republican candidate. One of his campaign videos has him in a Ford pickup. It's a red antique Ford pickup, driving and waving to people, and it's got American flags on the back of it, comparing that to a Klan event. These people openly despise Americans. These people openly despise the American flag and what it stands for. And as I mentioned in the previous segment, I don't know where Democrats who don't hate America and support terrorism, where they are supposed to go. I fear there's not enough of them to start a new party. And so either they are going to remove themselves from the process, maybe some will be Republicans, but I don't think for a lot of them that's an option, or more frighteningly, they will decide to hold their nose and just become the party of terrorism. New Fauci text coming out in which there were conversations he was part of talking about avoiding vaccines in the first trimester. It's just more of us learning that Fauci was, and we're talking about people's lives at this point, and the high level of women having miscarriages during this period of time, and Fauci knowing about it, and then instead deciding to continue to go out there and say there's absolutely no red flags whatsoever. The amount of deaths, increasingly, it is becoming apparent this guy is responsible for because of his lies. I love some of the videos circulating. This isn't specifically about Fauci, other than it was that period of time. Fauci had the media believing that if you got the vaccine, then you would not get COVID, you would not get sick, you certainly wouldn't die. And here is a CNN reporter hounding a man who was dropping off his child at a school, who the school, it was a private school, and I think they weren't requiring vaccines.
Well, I think it's a family decision, and we should respect, like everybody's privacy.
It is a family decision, but it makes everyone safer because so many people have gotten the vaccinations. Tens of thousands of people are not dying.
There's a lot of people who get the vaccine and it's dying right now.
Nah, that's not true.
So, no, it is true.
No, it's not true.
Fox News says the truth.
Fox News says it's true, but that's definitely not true. It's false. That's the problem.
Fox News is the one that you can get, like.
Now, let me just tell you, sir, the greatest scientists in the world know that this vaccine is saving lives. So my question for you is...
He's not the best scientist in the world.
Yeah, well,
that's just one opinion,
Yeah, you're hearing bad information, sir, but with all due respect, I wish you good health.
Thank you so much. Same to you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I love the white elitist CNN guy trying to school the poor, uneducated Hispanic guy. And of course, who turned out to be right.